What fan theories have blown your mind with their devastating logic? I read a theory about Courage the Cowardly Dog that said that Courage is actually a normal dog and he sees the world through a dog's eyes. All the villains in the show are just normal people, but to a little dog they seem scary. They don't actually live in the middle of nowhere, but since his owners are too old to take him outside for walks, he only knows what's around his immediate property, and everything beyond that is nothing because he's never seen it. This is a good theory. Also explains why Courage always feels like he has to protect his owners from all the scary things, even though the owners are very nonchalant about all of the situations, and act like everything is normal and Courage is freaking out for apparently no reason. Reading about Rugrats made me think of that episode where they think the world will end. They make a shelter and plan to survive, except there's only enough room for, not 5. So, they have to pick between Tommy, Chucky, Angelica, Phil and Lil. They actually make a logical choice for repopulating the earth. You would take both girls. Chucky has different family from either girl, so he's accepted. The choice would be between Tommy and Phil. Phil has redundant DNA with Lil. Tommy, while a cousin of Angelica, still brings more diversity. Leaving Phil out was the logical choice, if they truly had to. It's not broken down this way in the show, but they still reach the same result. The story of Aladdin is made up by the salesman at the beginning to persuade you to buy the lamp. This seems far more plausible than it being 10,000 years in the future. Doctor Who. The Doctor's name is a word of power, something that was introduced to the series in Moffat's Series 3 episode The Shakespeare Code. What does the Doctor's name do? It unlocks the Time War. This is the reason he trusts no one but himself to know his own name. During the ending of Forest of the Dead, the 10th Doctor also states to River that there could be only one way she could have known his name. This is also the reason why the Silents are terrified of the Doctor's name. And why not? It would release the Daleks and the Time Lord from the Lock Time War. It's speculated that this is the premise of the 50th anniversary episode. Willy Wonka knew those children would die in his factory. After Augustus gets sucked up the chute, they all hop on board the boat through the Tunnel of Doom. The boat doesn't have 2 extra vacant seats though. It was designed with prior knowledge that they would lose 2 participants before that point. Later they drive a cream-spewing car with only 4 seats. Did they have another car waiting in the garage in case the others made it? Of course not. Willy Wonka uses children to make candy. I've always thought Willy Wonka had amazing potential to be incredibly sinister. I like the idea that at the end of The Thing, 1982, when Kurt Russell offers Keith David the bottle and he drinks out of it, the bottle is filled with gasoline, one from the Molotovs he was throwing earlier. Since the creature wouldn't understand what gasoline tastes like, it wouldn't spit it out. Dude, it's like you just put a vengeful spirit in my brain to rest. The original Scooby-Doo series is set after a horrible economic depression. Everything is abandoned and falling apart, and all of the villains are people who would normally be really respected. Professors, museum curators, celebrities, who have fallen into hard times just like everyone else. How many times have the gang helped someone not go out of business? The Venture Brothers had a nice twist on this. Fred was an insane cult leader. Shaggy had gone so far around the bend he was imagining his dog was talking to him. In the Haunted Mansion at Disney World Disneyland, you commit suicide during the course of the ride and become a ghost. At the beginning of the ride, the ghost host, the narrator, says the only way to escape the mansion is to die, and he shows that he hanged himself. Near the end of the ride, there's a moment where the ride vehicle turns around backwards and you go off a balcony, which according to this theory represents you jumping to your death. Before this part of the ride, the ghosts are all trying to scare you, but afterwards they sing excitedly and invite you to party with them. The Grim Grinning Ghost song, the only human character in the ride, a groundskeeper, appears after the balcony drop. He faces toward the riders and seems terrified of you. Could be totally accidental, could be an intentional subtlety by the designers, but either way I've never looked at that ride the same way since. There was actually an idea to have the guests fall backwards into a dirt hole while a gravedigger, shovel in hand, looks down at them. They scrapped the idea after deciding it was too morbid. Samurai Jack takes place in post-apocalyptic Townsville. Powerpuff Girls. That 70s show is a vague sequel to Happy Days. At the end of Happy Days, Richie and Ralph go off to the Korean War, or at least they are training for it. Fonzie stays behind. At this point you must remember that the Fonz was always the person who kept Richie cool. Flash forward 20 years, Richie, now Red, has become bitter after the war, and without the catalyst that was Arthur Fonzarelli, his friendship with full neighbor Bob Ralph has fallen apart. Happy Days was made in the 70s and set in the 50s. That 70s show was in the 90s and set in the 70s. BTW, I know this is completely not true, but I like it anyway. The existence of SpongeBob and his strange friends is the result of radiation from nuclear arms testing that was performed on the Bikini Atoll in the late 40s and early 50s. Since they live under the atoll, the town is known as Bikini Bottom. I think this one has some truth to it. In the beginning of 2001, A Spacey Odyssey, a black screen is displayed while music plays for a few minutes before the film starts. It's believed that this is a monolith tilted 90 degrees and taking up the entire screen, as if the entire film is a technological and evolutionary advancement that Kubrick is bestowing us. Sean Connery's character in The Rock, John Patrick Mason, is actually James Bond. He got caught spying on America and was hidden away in various prisons. This man does not exist, not in the United States or Great Britain, says FBI Director Womack. This ties in with the theory of James Bond being a code name for different agents. If I remember correctly, when the FBI finally lets him out, one of his requests in addition to a hotel suite is a tailored suit, in addition to a shave and haircut. He's not merely a former soldier and intelligence agent. He has a taste for the finer things, much like Bond. Blade Runner. Ridley Scott finally closed the debate a few years ago as to whether or not Deckard was actually a replicant. He totally was, but to take this one step further, he was a replicant implanted with the memories of Gaff, Edward James Olmos' character. Full stop. Gaff was actually the top Blade Runner, but was sidelined due to some injury or illness, hence the cane. And so Deckard was created and implanted with Gaff's memories to continue the search for Roy Batty and friends. This explains why Gaff never really does anything aside from drive Deckard around and why he treats him with such contempt. Gaff's origami also hint at Deckard's true nature, as they seem to demonstrate an insight into what Deckard is feeling. A chicken when he is feeling scared, a stick man with a boner when he is about to meet the smoking hot Rachel, and the unicorn from Deckard's recurring dream. It also helps explain the compliment Gaff pays Deckard at the end of the film, after he apparently hovered above the building and watched Batty nearly kill Deckard without intervening. He lands and says, "You've done a man's job," which is the highest praise you could give to a replicant. When it's all laid out like that, I hardly even think it should be considered a theory. It's just clearly what was going on if you take a few minutes to think about it. The Jetsons and the Flintstones are two portions of the same society. The people living in Bedrock are actually members of a far future, one may say post-human, society that have rejected the day-to-day electronic assistants to live like their long-dead ancestors did, or at least what they think they lived like. History has lost a bit in translation. This explains the talking animals. They are just synthetic creations. It's been so long since any actual animal lived that didn't have human communication bred written into it that the ferals don't realize how silly it is to be talking with creatures that didn't even exist alongside early humans. Science fan theory. Let's skip the Night hatred for a moment. I, too, think he's become something of a joke, but he has made a number of worthwhile movies, and this is one I initially couldn't stand, thinking it was full of ridiculous plot holes. And then, eureka. When I first saw this film, I didn't realize that it wasn't about aliens at all. It's about the return of demons. Notice it's all about a priest's resurgence of belief, and a preordained moment of redemption if dared and attempted. There is no alien technology or weaponry or clothing of any kind, only a clawed, naked beast creature and lights in the sky. Furthermore, the running joke throughout the movie is that people see these invaders in a way that's related to their particular frame of mind. The cop sees them as pranks to kids, the bookstore owners see them as a hoax to sell commercials. The army recruitment officer sees them as invading military, the kids see them as UFOs, and the priest sees them as test of faith. This understanding of the film removed my hatred of the "you've got to be killing me, they were killed by water" concept. In fact, the priest's daughter had been referred to as holy, as revealed during Mel's key monologue, recognized by all who saw her at her birth as an angel, and her quite particular relationship to water is shown to be very special and spiritual. In other words, she has placed vials of what are, essentially, holy water all around the house, and the creature's reaction when coming in contact with this blessed liquid is exactly like monsters' vampires being splashed by spiritual acid. This view of the movie also explains the creature's actions. They act like superior tricksters, are not able to break in through closed doors, can be trapped behind simple wooden latches, all mythological elements of demons and vampire-like creatures of lore. It also explains the news over the radio at the end of the movie that an ancient method of killing the creatures has been found in 3 small cities in the Middle East. One would suspect the religious hubs of the 3 main Abrahamic traditions, each discovering the mystic methods of protection and dispatch that I've noted earlier. Note also, all the Christian iconography throughout the movie, the references to signs and wonders, the true meaning of the title, the crucifix shapes hinted at everywhere. Check out the overhead shot, looking down on the street driving into town, and the ultimate fact that the entire movie is built around a priest rediscovering he is not abandoned to a random, godless, scientifically oriented universe but, rather, is part of a predicted and dreamed of plan. Now these creatures may for all intents and purposes be some sort of extraterrestrial or interdimensional aliens, but the point of the movie seems to be that they are, in the actuality of the film world, the dark stuff from which all the characters' tales of devils and night creatures were born. You've sold me. I'm watching it again. Rufus the mole rat from Kim Possible is a phallic symbol. He lives in Ron's pocket and his favorite food is tacos. And all the girls love him. How Garfield is actually dying of starvation, and just imagining John and Odie. There was a reference to this in a Halloween-themed comic. Garfield woke up in a condemned and abandoned house. He calls out for Odie and John, but there is no answer. He then wills the illusion back on himself, and continues his delusions about his family. To all you Potterheads out there, when Sybil Trelawney predicted Harry was born in midwinter, she was laughed at, as Harry's birthday is in July. However, it is a known fact that, spoiler alert, Voldemort's soul is inside Harry. It's possible that Professor Trelawney was detecting the part of Voldemort inside Harry as Voldemort was born mid-December. Pinky in the Brain, one is a genius, the other's insane. Brain constantly plans to take over the world, suggesting he is insane. Pinky often finds ways to ruin these plans. So, who is the genius? Note that there are 2 episodes in which Pinky attempts to take over the world, and both times he almost succeeds until Brain screws it up. Something I noticed about the movie Training Day. Throughout the movie, Denzel's character rationalizes breaking the law. Everything he does suggests he has no regard for it. The last scene as he drives away defeated, in the middle or nowhere, with no one around. In the middle of the night he stops at a stoplight. Not even most regular people would stop at that stoplight. And at the stoplight is where the Russians catch up to him and gun him down. I thought it was interesting that the one time he subconsciously obeys the law, it is finally his undoing. I remember a pretty solid one about how R2-D2 was Luke's father. This was before Empire Strikes Back came out. Luke's father was mortally wounded by Vader. His brain was removed from his body and placed in life support inside a robot. This is why C-3PO is so worried about R2's operational status. C-3 knows that R2 has biological components. Turns out Luke, who got very little Jedi training, isn't all that great. It's his Jedi father, inside of R2, every time. Think about it, early on, when Luke does something with the Force, R2 is always there, except for the one time on Hoth. And what is R2 doing at that time? Deploying a long-range Force antenna we never see again. It just occurred to me that there was a time when nobody knew that Darth Vader was Luke's father. That must have been mind-blowing. Archer TV show. Whenever someone eats at the Chinese restaurant and brings home a tinfoil swan full of leftovers, they are going to betray the company. Spoiler alert, rate seasons 1 and 2. Episode 1, when Archer wants to break into the mainframe and alter his financial records. Episode 9. Lana is going to join Odin. And there is another episode where Cyril takes a bribe at the restaurant and his bribe money is in the swan. I'm sure this theory is out there somewhere else, but I've yet to find it. In the beginning of Finding Nemo, the father imagines one son survived when in reality his whole family was destroyed. The movie is an allegory of the father's journey through the stages of grief. Denial, he won't let his son go to school because it's not safe. Anger, he scolds his son for venturing out of his control. Bargaining, he puts up with an amnesiac travel buddy to help him find his son. Despair, he sees his son flushed down the drain. Acceptance, he learns to let go and let things be the way they are. Almost everyone in the story tells the father he has to let go of his son. His travels takes him to the land down under, aka Underworld. The movie ends with him saying goodbye as his son visually disappears into the void. And the kicker? Nemo means nobody in Latin. In 20,000 Leagues, Captain Nemo is messing with people who ask him what his name is. My history teacher believes that in Inception, the whole film is really a plot by the dead wife to get Leonardo DiCaprio out of the dream, a plan which fails. I never knew Snuffleupagus was Big Bird's imaginary friend until I was an adult. I guess I never picked up on the fact that only Big Bird talked to him. Oh god. The theory I once heard Richard Feynman mention, that the universe has only one electron. That's a pretty negative view. That isn't Forrest's son. Jenny just takes advantage of him after she learns that he's a shrimp tycoon. After much discussion, this obviously wasn't the case as she knew he was rich long beforehand. I feel much better. Not exactly a fan theory, but I thought Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds would have been 100x better if the final shot was that tripod falling down and its alien pilot falling out, except for one crucial difference. Instead of a generic alien body, the aliens behind the invasion are ETs. You find out in the last few seconds of the movie that you've been watching a sequel to what you thought was a cuddly, family-friendly movie about a young boy and his alien buddy, but was actually about how a naive little kid thwarted authorities and helped the alien scout who laid the groundwork for an invasion and attempted genocide. This would have been Spielberg's magnum opus, but would have been a giant undeserved frick you to H.G. Wells. Battleship was actually a board game. All of the Legend of Zelda games are about the exact same cast of characters, but they're being retold in different cultures around the world, accounting for the vast differences. Hence the name, The Legend of Zelda. My current favorite is that in the new series of Doctor Who, the character Rory Williams is actually the Doctor's arch nemesis, the Master. I'm just going to copy and paste the theory. Rory has been becoming much more irrational and aggressively violent. Also, in the episode Let's Kill Hitler, after witnessing River's regeneration and being exposed to raw time energy for the first time, he begins to complain of a banging in my head, which Amy dismisses as Hitler in the closet. Also think back to the God complex. Rory did not have a room. He was the only character they made a point to say did not have one. And when the Doctor looked into his room, all he said was, "Of course it was you." And we hear the wailing of the TARDIS distress call in 4 repetitions. The only other time it has made this sound was when the Master stole it in series 3. Also a satisfying explanation for River Song having Time Lord DNA. Will was murdered on the basketball court in West Philly. The taxi driver is God. That's why we felt that the cab was different or rare. God takes him heaven where he lives in a mansion with his wealthy aunt and uncle and slowly works out his issues and hardships. Honestly, I want to make a huge overarching story that has all of Will Smith's movies being sequels to Fresh Prince. Just about every single theory in the Sherlock fandom about how he survived the fall. Gollum killed Frodo's parents. Here's why. Gollum was one of the store, and they were the water hobbits. Drogon and Primula, Frodo's mom and dad, died in a boating accident. When Gollum chased after Bilbo to get the ring back, he knew only 2 things about him, Shire and Baggins, which also applies to Drogon. The books say that when he chased Bilbo, Gollum got to the river and turned back. Witnesses to Drogon and Primula's accident say they saw a struggle. Back to the Future. The Doc is ready to kill himself along with Marty in that parking lot during the first time travel scene. Not only has he never tested the time machine, but he claims that many of his inventions have been failures. So during the moment when he's about to find out if his life's work was a huge success or a complete waste, He not only drives the DeLorean towards himself, but grabs onto Marty when he tries to run away. If that first time travel test was a failure, they both would have been killed, which is exactly what Doc wanted had the experiment been a failure. I have some Back to the Future theories that will blow your mind. Go on. In Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is in the real world in the ending scene. He talks about how totems only works for specific people. The top was his wife's totem. It wouldn't work for him. His totem is his wedding ring. In the dream world, his wife is alive, and he is still married to her. Therefore he wears his wedding ring. In all the scenes in the real world, his wife is dead and he is no longer married. He doesn't wear his ring because of that. In the last scene, he isn't wearing his ring. Time to rewatch Inception and pay far too close attention to Leo's left hand. There's a theory in Ferris Bueller's Day Off that Cameron invented Ferris and he's living out what Cameron wishes he could be. Makes the movie freaking mind-blowing. I have a 5-year-old daughter who used to love Lazy Town, and while being subjected to hours of it I came up with a theory. In the first episode, Stephanie comes to town to live with her aunt and uncle. They don't explain what happened to her parents. When she arrives, the town is in a terrible state. Her uncle explains that there used to be a hero who protected and helped the town and he had a number 9 on his chest. He shows her how they used to contact him and she figures out what to do and uses the device to contact Sportacus, who then comes and helps the town. Sportacus has a number 10 on his chest. This causes the villain of the town, Robbie Rotten, to surface and fight against Sportacus and try to stop people doing any activities and sports. My theory is that Robbie Rotten was number 9, previously a hero himself, and in a battle with another villain in the past inadvertently caused the deaths of Stephanie's parents. The guilt of this has made him exile himself in the bowels of Lazy Town, where he tries to get them to be safe and not do anything dangerous. He thinks Sportacus is going to be someone killed and doesn't want the past to repeat. Neither he nor Stephanie know who the other is. It was a boring show. It's my theory and has blown other people's minds. So, the bride doesn't kill Bill in Kill Bill. First you have to put her rampage in chronological order. She wakes up in the hospital, kills Buck, flies to Japan, kills everyone in the tea house, then comes back to the States to kill Vanita Green. We know this because Oren's name is already crossed off the list when she parks outside Vanita's house. In the process of killing Green, she accidentally does so in front of her young daughter. Her immediate reaction is shame. She tries to hide the knife behind her leg. From that point on, she doesn't kill anyone else, but dies from a snake bite. Daryl Hannah's character has her eye plucked out but is left alive. Then we get to Bill. They tell the story of the 5-point palm fist of death technique, but in the training sequences it's never shown that she learns it. We are specifically told that Pai Mai never taught it to anyone. The other part that's suspicious is the play acting. When Beatrix first runs into the house, there's a play scene with her daughter. They pretend to shoot her and she pretends to be dead. This is what Bill does. At the end of the film, Beatrix is curled up on a bathroom floor crying, "Thank you. Thank you." Who is she thanking? Bill for letting her go. It was the only way for either of them to exit the situation gracefully. During the end credits, each of the people on the list who died gets a line through their name. Daryl Hannah is marked with a question mark because she was left alive. But Bill's name isn't marked at all, because they never killed Bill in Kill Bill. One more bit of evidence. We know how Beatrix reacts around kids. Not only was she ashamed to kill Vanita Green in front of Nikki, but when she first found out she was pregnant she was able to cut a deal with the assassin sent to kill her. As soon as she sees BB is still alive, she knows she can't actually kill Bill, and that's how they get roped into the whole play acting thing. My absolute favorite one is the Game of Thrones fan theories about Jon Snow. While in the books, don't watch the show, but I would assume there too. It's believed by everyone that he's Eddard Stark's son by some unknown woman. The fan theory states that he's actually the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. Rhaegar's abduction of Lyanna sparked the overthrow of the Targaryens. That means that he's Daenerys' nephew. an acceptable spouse for her in Targaryen terms, and possibly the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. Spoiler, it is such a cool plot possibility. This would make Daenerys Jon's aunt, not his cousin as I had originally typed. Dio. As for questions of legitimacy, Dany can't inherit by primogeniture. She's a woman. It could be argued that Aegon Targaryen would be the legitimate heir, as he is the oldest legitimate male descendant of Mad Aerys. However, Jon could have a reasonable claim if he's older than Aegon, though it would be imperfect because he was born out of wedlock. But of course, in the GOT universe, legitimacy is only half your battle, and the other half is being awesome. This one is the idea from the Pokemon games that the guy who is in each gym that is right by the door and is saying stuff like "How's it going, champ? Wow, good job beating the gym, blah blah" could actually be the main character's father. He had troubles with your mother and couldn't end up seeing you, so what he did was he would go to each gym and watch you fight and cheer you on from the sideline anonymously. I realize that in Ruby Sapphire Emerald your father is one of the gym leaders, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I am talking about Gen 1. All of Kanye West's fans are actually living inside of Kanye West's mind. After the car crash, Kanye was put into a coma. He has not come out yet, and everything he has done since then is actually part of his comatose. Therefore, anyone who has ever heard a Kanye West song is actually part of his imagination. Therefore, we should all listen to what he says and follow his rules, because Kanye West clearly dictates good fortune. Care Bears. I have a theory. Grumpy Bear should actually be Genius Bear, but he's been turned grumpy because at some point he realized that none of the other bears gave a crap about being reasonable, rational, logical or sensible. Watch an episode, you'll see. Scooby doesn't really talk. Shaggy is a ventriloquist. He uses ventriloquism several times in the show. Reddit is actually a terrorist plot created to reduce the productivity of the Western world. OP asked for theories, not hard science. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.